Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Stitch Sessions. We are diving into a fall project today, and it is this really sweet coffee cozy. There's nothing worse than when you get a takeout cup and it is scalding hot. And it can be cumbersome to always ask for a sleeve. So I decided to crochet my own. Now there's many of these types of projects out there, so you can find a variety of different ways to create your own crochet coffee cozy, but I thought I'd stick to this one. It's a very simple design, and I chose this little ribbed effect so that some of you that are a little newer, or even some of you that are more experienced, can work on practicing your front post double crochet stitches, and that's what creates this really fun little ridge on the outside. Now you can put the ridge side on the inside of your cup and the other side is smooth. It's totally up to you. So if I take that out there and you turn it around, you can see that side is nice and smooth, okay? But totally up to you, but it's a very easy project, nice and quick. Makes actually for a great addition to any fall type birthday gifts maybe. And then I just added these two sweet little buttons as a way to accent it. Now they do come undone. So sometimes it might be, you might feel like it's a little tricky. It might be too hot to actually slide it in. You don't feel like you have enough time because it's so hot. So that's why I actually made mine so that you can open it. Not all coffee cozies are done that way. And then that way you can already hold on to it while you fasten it, and it'll protect your hands from the heat, okay? So let's get started on making our very own coffee cozy. So here are all the materials you'll need for your cozy. The yarn I'm using is Aunt Lydia's Fashion 3 yarn, I believe. I think the 3 is a little thicker than the 10. And this is actually a little bit left over from the one I created here. And oddly enough, I initially didn't think about using a yarn that's so thin. This is considered a fine weight 1 yarn, I believe. But what I love about it, it's made out of mercerized cotton. And cotton is always my go-to for any item that I'm making that's gonna handle either moisture or extreme temperatures like heat. It really withstands well. You can certainly make them with acrylic or acrylic blend. You just have to be careful because acrylic can be affected by extreme heat. So I always like using things like cotton. If you wanted to use like Bernat's Handicrafter cotton, that's 100% cotton. That's also another great yarn to use. But for this tutorial, I'm just gonna show you how I use this thinner cotton, this thinner yarn to create my cozy. Now I have just a little bit left here, so I'm not sure if I have enough left for a full second cozy, but it'll be enough to show you how to get started and how to create your cozy. So since I'm using such a fine yarn, the hook I'm going to be using today is a 3.75 millimeter hook, which is known as an F or a size 5. All right. You will also need a darning needle for sewing in your ends. You'll need 2 buttons. Now I picked these up at Michael's. They are so cute. They came in a package, but you can either have them on the design side or you can have them on the plain side. Okay. And in case you're wondering, these buttons are 20 millimeters in diameter. So that's really important to know because our buttonholes will accommodate this particular button. So if you're following along exactly with me, you will want to find 20 millimeter buttons. And of course you'll need regular thread and a thread needle in order to sew your buttons in. So a thread needle is different than a darning needle, and I think you can see the main difference there. So a yarn needle will be a bit thicker, which if you tried to sew in your button, you wouldn't get anywhere, okay? So thread needle, really important. And of course, you always need a handy pair of scissors. So let's begin. Okay, to begin, we're going to start by placing a slip knot on our hook. And we are going to chain up 20 chains. Now remember that I'm using a thinner yarn. For those of you that are using more of a medium 4-weight yarn, you might only need to chain 14 chains or 10 chains. So you will have to gauge that. One thing I forgot to mention is that The height of my cozy is approximately 3 inches. It's just shy of 3 inches tall, or 7.5 centimeters tall. So I just, you can gauge by how tall you want it. So just keep that in mind. If you want to go by my height of 3 inches, then you're going to chain the number of chains you need for that height. Now, because of the yarn I'm using, I happen to know that I need to begin with 20 chains. So yarn over, pull through 1, 2, 3, and there's my 20th chain. Okay, so just make sure it's not twisted and that it's nice and even, just like that. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we are going to find the 4th chain from the hook. We never count the loop that's on the hook, so we count 1, 2, 3, and 4. And into that chain, we are going to place a double crochet stitch. So you're going to yarn over, insert your hook, and pull up a loop. So you have 3 loops on your hook. Pull through the first 2 and pull through the second 2. You're going to get a really great chance to practice all of your double crochets with this project. So into the next stitch, we're going to do the same thing. So you'll yarn over, and you want to find the very next chain, and you're going to place a double crochet into that. Oops. Now, where we skipped those first 3 stitches there, that is going to count as a double crochet at the beginning of your row. Okay, so don't worry that it's bowing out a little bit like that. It'll all even out in the end. So continue to place 1 double crochet into each chain stitch all the way to the end of your row, and that will complete row 1 for you. And I will meet you at the end to take you on to row 2. Okay, so I have completed row 1, and I now have a little strip that looks like this. And we are now going to go on to row number 2. Now at the end of row 1, you will have a total of 18 stitches if you're following along exactly with me. Okay, and that is going to be the number of stitches that you will have for every row from here on out. So to begin row 2, you're going to chain 3, 1, 2, and 3, and you're going to turn your work. Now for row 2, we're going to do another row of simply placing 1 double crochet into each stitch. So for these first 2 rows, they're going to be exactly the same. So you are going to yarn over. Now what you want to watch is anytime you've chained 3, you don't want to go right away into that first stitch. You're going to go into the next stitch. This stitch right here belongs to this chain 3. Our chain 3 will count as a double crochet. So you'll skip over that one, go into the next one, and place a double crochet. And you're going to do that into every single stitch. It'll be a little easier now than working into the chains because you actually have a stitch to work into. Okay, so 1 double crochet into each, and at the end of row 2, you should still have 18 stitches in total, okay? And don't forget, when you get to the end here, you really want to make sure that you get the top of that chain 3, right? Because a lot of times people think this is the last stitch, but we always have that chain 3 at the end. That counts as a stitch. And if it helps, check out my lesson on how to identify parts of your stitch. And it talks a lot about like what parts of the stitch to work into and what all the terms are, okay? So if you get to the end and you go, oh, I only have 17 stitches, chances are, if I just turn my work here, that little chain 3 got forgotten because a lot of times in the beginning it kind of smooths down. And so it's easy to think it's not there, but it is. So that's why counting is important. All right, guys, I'll meet you at the end of row 2. Okay, so I am coming up to the end of row 1. I just wanted to show you, this is the last stitch. So I'm placing a double crochet. And now I have 1 more to go. See how that almost looks like it's done, but it bumps out a little bit. So this is my chain 3 right here. And I'm just going to place a stitch into the top of my chain 3. And that ensures that my stitch count stays nice and even, just like that. Okay, so now my initial chain row ended up being a little bit tighter than I would have liked, so that's why it looks like it's dipping in a bit. But essentially your work is going to look like that, 18 stitches. Now we're going to move on to row 3, and this is going to be our repeat pattern for the body of our cozy. In fact, row 2 was part of that repeat. So you're going to do row 2 and row 3, row 2, row 3, row 2, row 3 to create your length. So for row 3, we will chain 3 and turn our work. And now we're going to continue working double crochet stitches. However, we're going to create front post double crochet stitches. And again, that's why that lesson on identifying parts of your stitch will come in really, really handy. I'll leave a link for it in the description box down below. But I'll show you a little bit here about our front post stitches. So you're going to yarn over like you would with a regular double crochet. And now instead of going into the next stitch, which is the top here, we're going to work around the post. So that means we're going to go in through that space. See the space there? This is the post of the stitch. So you're going to insert your hook in between and back around, and that pushes that post forward. And that's why we call it a front post stitch. So then you would yarn over and pull up a loop like you would with a regular double crochet, and you'll end up having 3 loops on your hook as usual. Then you'll yarn over, pull through the first 2 loops, and then yarn over and pull through the last 2 loops. So you're resolving it like you would a regular double crochet stitch. And so it might not be able to see quite yet, but what that does is it's pulling that post forward, which is what's going to create that ridge on the other side of our work, which you'll see in a moment. So let's do that again. Around the next post, which is right here, we're going to insert our hook between the posts and behind. Whoops, sorry, I have to yarn over first. Behind the post. Whoops, pull up a loop. And then you do a double crochet as usual. Okay, we'll do it one more time. Yarn over, in behind the post, pull up a loop, pull through 2, and pull through 2. Okay, so, oops, let me take that out here. Okay, so you can see if I laid it down this way, it's pushing it out forward, and then on the back, that's what's creating this ridge. So we are going to create our cozy going lengthwise so that it'll wrap around your cup. Okay, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So for now, let's continue doing a front post double crochet around every single post. Okay, so every post is going to get a front post double crochet. So you go into the next one, push it forward, and double crochet. Okay, you're going to do this all the way to the end of row 3, and I will meet back up with you actually when you have 1 stitch left, just to talk you through how to end row 3. Okay, so now I've done a few more. So what I love about using this front post is it really kind of snuggles one side of your fabric in quite nicely. And see, there's that beautiful ridge starting to form. Okay, finish row 3, and I'll meet up with you when you've done your last post right here. Do not post around that chain 3. I'm going to talk you through when we get there. Okay, so this is my last actual stitch, and then I have my chain 3. So I'm going to do a front post around that last stitch. And this is the way you're going to end all odd number rows. So this is row 3. This is our front post row. You want to find the top of your chain 3 like we've discussed before in the other 2 rows. And you're just going to simply place a regular double crochet. So we're not working around the post here. You just insert the top of your chain 3 and double crochet. Okay, so every row will start and end with a double crochet stitch. So the beginning is always going to be a chain 3, and the end is going to be a double crochet, and then everything in between for row 3, for example, is all front post stitches. Now, don't worry if you see this little dip happening here. It's very common that that happens, especially during a lot of post stitches, because it's pulling your posts forward, so it's taking a little bit of tension away there. Now, if it really bothers you, what you can do is you, instead of doing the top of your chain 3, you can do the second chain. I'll show you what that looks like there. The trick is not to stitch tightly. When you stitch tightly, it will pull it up like that. So this is my second stitch. So that's chain 3 there. This is chain 2. So I'll go into there and I'll double crochet and see how I'm loosening up my loops here. That's just going to help it sit really nice and relaxed. There you go. See? So if you like that look better, you can go into the second chain. Trick is not to stitch tightly. You got to be a little bit more relaxed. So that's the end of row 3. So you're basically going to repeat now row 2, which is double crochets, just regular double crochets, and then repeat row 3. So I'm just going to take you through how to go back into an even numbered row, which is row 2. As always, you chain 3, turn your work. See that ridge, how it came through? That was from all the front posts being done from the previous row. Okay, and now, so remember, we skip this first stitch into the very next stitch. We just go into the stitch and do a double crochet. So like I said, you're going to get really comfortable with your double crochets and your front post double crochets. Okay, so this is all the even numbered rows, just like that. So it gives some spacing to the post, the ribbing here, and creates a really, really beautiful effect. That is pretty much it. So row 2, or even numbered rows, are all 1 double crochet into each stitch, which we did. And row 3, all odd numbered rows, are going to be all front post stitches. And you should always have 18 stitches at the end of every row. You're now going to repeat row 2 and row 3 until you get to row 31. And row 31 will end up being a front post double crochet row. Now for me, 31 rows help me get all the way around, and actually it's still quite comfortable, okay? You may want yours to sit a little bit more snugly. The only thing is you don't want it to be too tight, because sometimes it tends to slip off if it's too tight, like it's hard to hang on there. If it's too loose, it's also going to slip off too easily. So you just want to gauge what works for you. And remember, when you throw this in the wash, etc., there'll always be a little bit of a shrinkage factor. So you're going to do as many rows as you need. Like I said, I went up to row number 31. So basically we're working this way. Okay. And I stopped at row 31, which is this row right here. And then I'll meet you up with you here to talk about how to create our buttonholes. Okay guys, now because this is a swatch, I am running out of my yarn. I'm going to take you through your buttonholes now. Once you've reached row 31, you'll have just finished doing a front post row. So you would turn your work, okay? And now what you would do is you want to do row 32 with just another row of regular double crochets. So we want to create a little bit more of a distance between that last rib here. Okay, so if I pick up my, whoops, going this way. So see, we just, in this instance, this was the last front post row. And now we're going to create one more row of just regular double crochets. Okay, and then we'll create our little eyelet there. So you want to, when you get your length, you're just going to do your usual chain 3, 2, and 3, and work a double crochet. And this is going to be the setup for creating our buttonholes. Okay, so I finished that additional row of double crochet. So now you can see there's nice spacing there. And now we're going to create our buttonholes. So that means for the next row, this is row 33, we're actually only going to chain 1 and then turn our work. For this row, we're only going to be using single crochet stitches. So in this case, what we're going to do is we are going to go right back into that very first stitch. Remember, for the double crochets, we did not do that. But because that chain 1 tends to get snuggled down in there, I like to go right away into that first stitch. So we're going to insert and place a single crochet. So remember, a single crochet does not need you to yarn over. Into the next 2 stitches, you will do the same. Single crochet into the second stitch, and then single crochet into the third stitch. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to chain 3. 1, 2, and 3. We will then skip 3 stitches here, 1, 2, 3, and into the 4th stitch, you're going to place a single crochet. And as you can see, that's created a little gap there. That is our first buttonhole. Okay, now into each of the next 5 stitches, you're going to continue to place 1 single crochet. So that means that you'll have a total of 6 stitches from the last buttonhole to the first buttonhole. So how many do I have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, now we're going to chain 3, skip the next 3 stitches, 1, 2, and 3, and into the next one, you're going to place a single crochet. And so that gives us our second buttonhole, just like that. You now have 2 stitches left, so just simply place a single crochet into the next stitch, and remember, into the top of our chain 3 or the chain 2, whichever you prefer. I'll do the chain 2. If you do the chain 2, remember you got to pull it up a little bit more loosely. Okay, so there you have it. So that is the back of your work. And this is the front if you want your ribs to come showing through. So you just created your buttonholes. Okay, so now what's going to happen is you will chain 3 to work around row 34. This will be our last row. You'll turn your work and you're going to finish off by placing 1 double crochet into each stitch at the end. And again, I just want to show you. So once you create your buttonhole, then we have 1 more row with regular double crochets across. It's pretty straightforward. Okay, so remember, you're going to skip this first stitch into the next stitch, double crochet, and then into the next stitch here, another double crochet. And this brings you to our first buttonhole. So you can do this in one of 2 ways. We have 3 chains here, so we have to place 3 stitches in here to keep our stitch count the same. You can either work into the space, or you can actually work into each individual chain. Now, for this project, I actually wanted to work into each chain. I just felt it just kept things a little bit more even. But it's totally up to you. If it's easier for you to go into the space, by all means do it. Just remember that it's 3 stitches only. So into the next chain there. Just like that. And the third one sometimes gets a little hidden there. Into the next chain, just like that. Okay, and now that's really given some fortification to your buttonhole. The next stitch is a regular stitch. So now you're just going to continue on as usual. 1 double crochet into each stitch all the way to the end. Okay, and then when you get to these chain 3s, remember there has to be 3 stitches here, and then 1, 2, and 3 at the very end. So you still want to have 18 stitches at the end. Okay, go ahead and finish row 34, and we're almost done. Okay, row 34 is complete. Okay, and so I've created the buttonholes, and now I've got this nice extra solid row at the end to finish off. Now I have completely finished my yarn, but I do want to talk you through creating a little border. So you don't have to do this. The actual edging can be quite cool to have this little live edge, I call it. I just decided to create a little border. So all I did was just placed one single crochet all the way around, just to give it a nice little finished edge, okay? Now, across the top is pretty easy. You would just chain one, turn your work, and single crochet around. What you want to do is, remember, when you get to the end, you want to place 2 additional single crochets into that stitch, and that helps you go around the corner. Those of you that have followed me for a while, you know I talk about that a lot. Going around the corners, I've done these borders before. And then you're going to work along the sides of your stitches. Okay, so let me see if I have just enough to show you here. Okay, so this would be along the top, and this is along the side. So because I'm really running out of yarn, I'm just going to chain one here. Into the side of a double crochet stitch, you can comfortably fit 2 stitches. So see, that's the side of mine. So I always like to place one at the top and maybe one in the center. So you just want to find a loop somewhere, a couple of loops, and you want to insert your hook there. It can be a little tricky at the beginning. And then single crochet. Okay, so that's in the middle. And now I'll find kind of the base of that stitch, which is right there. And I will, single crochet there. Whoops, and that's it. I've kind of run out of yarn. But hopefully you can see the effect that gives. So the stitches continue to round out around the side there. You want to be careful not to place too many stitches here because it will throw off your edge. So basically I've got one single crochet in the center of the stitch and then one at the top or the bottom, however you want to call it. So then here's the chain 3. I would do one in the center chain and then in the bottom, in the middle of the double crochet and the bottom, in the middle of the chain and the bottom. So if you have 34 rows, for example, if each row had 2 single crochets, you would end up having 68 stitches all the way down your long side. So hopefully that makes sense. Really, very, very straightforward. But again, if you just want to leave yours with a little bit more of that slightly live edge, that looks really cute too. And I debated leaving mine like that, but I just figured a nice border would make more sense to me. So that's it. If you do not wish to do a border, you can snip off your yarn and we can move on to sewing on our buttons, and we're pretty much complete. Otherwise, you want to finish your border, okay? Okay, guys, so I think sewing a button on is pretty straightforward, but I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about the button placement. So this is a very small little piece here. So when I turn it over, before I actually started sewing my button on, I just folded my work here, and then I folded where I would see that comfortably that button's going to go, right? So as you can see, my buttons fit nicely here. So I ended off with 2 rows of regular double crochets, and remember at the beginning we did the same thing, 2 regular rows before we started posting. So these 2 rows should sit nicely over these 2 rows. What you might want to do, just to kind of help you out, is get a piece of yarn and snake it through on the other side here, like a contrasting color, so you know where to place your button, and do the same thing over here. And it's just so that you can keep that visual where it is, right? Because of course it's easy once you take this out to forget where exactly your button goes. Then over that little piece of yarn that you've used as a marker, I would place my button and then start to sew it in, okay? And in this case, I used white yarn, but if you can find, funny enough, I thought I did have an exact match of thread to this, but I did not. White still works just fine, but if you can find a matching color, that would be super, super great. And that's it. So you just sew your buttons on, and of course, you always want to test out your buttonholes to make sure that they fit nice. So see how it's snug? It's snug, but it's stretching with the button. That's exactly what I want. And that is it, guys. That is how you crochet your very own coffee cozy. I hope you found that as easy as I think it is, and a great way to practice those post stitches. Stay tuned. We've got more projects coming up that are going to use those posts. Now, if you have any questions or if anything is unclear to you, please do feel free to leave me a question in the comment box down below. And of course, you can always just email me directly at info@crochetcrafty.com. And if you like these types of projects, remember, give me a thumbs up and I'll know to keep coming up with more project ideas like these, especially as we get into the warmer months here. And if you are new here, I invite you to press that subscribe button. Come hang out with me every Wednesday morning. I upload a brand new tutorial, and sometimes I sprinkle a few extra bonus videos throughout the week. In the meantime, everyone, have an amazing day. Enjoy your coffee. Happy crocheting, and I will see you in the next video. Take good care of yourselves. Bye-bye.